Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Startup Junkies podcast. We're excited and grateful for you for tuning in, however you're consuming this podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe, like, comment, share, all that fun stuff. If you're listening anywhere else, subscribe and enjoy. My name is Caleb. I am joined by some of my usual co-hosts and a co-host that you may recognize if you've listened to or watched this show for any amount of time. I'm with Jeff Amerine, Davis McEntire. Welcome, guys. And then we're joined by familiar face, Matthew Ward, who ventured off from the Startup Junkie team, but he's, as the prodigal son, he has returned, and we're excited to have him back on the podcast. How's it going, Matthew?
It's going great, man. Glad to be back.
And we are joined by a special guest today, Phil Libin. He's the co-founder and CEO of a company you may have heard called Evernote. He also is the co-founder and CEO of All Turtles, a mission-driven product studio that works to solve meaningful problems worldwide, and another company called Mmhmm, an incredible video editing software. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Well played. Phil, you have been an icon in many ways in terms of successful growth and exits in the venture capital space and doing some things recently. Give us a little bit of the origin story. This is the part where everybody gets to give their equivalent of, how Wolverine became part of the X-Men. So we'll give you your time to tell us more about your background and a little of the details.
Well, I was born at a very young age in what used to be the Soviet Union, in a city that used to be called Leningrad, now St. Petersburg. Came to the U.S. when I was 8. We were refugees from the Soviet Union. I'm a programmer. I'm a former VC. I'm on my 5th startup because, I don't know, can't learn a lesson, I guess. I spent I grew up mostly in New York, and then went to college in Boston, and then stayed there, started a couple of companies in the Boston area, and then moved to California for Evernote. And then retired from Evernote, became a VC, realized I wasn't very good at VCing, started a couple of more companies, and then a few months ago, decided I needed to flee San Francisco, and so wound up in lovely downtown Bentonville, where I am right now, and it's great.
Well, we're glad to have you for sure. It just said, that's kind of begs the next question of all the places you could have possibly gone, and rest assured, we're really grateful that you're in and around our zip code here. Why Bentonville, Arkansas? I think it'd be interesting to get your perspective.
Well, honestly, almost at random. I was in the Bay Area for about 15 years. The last 7 of that, I was living in downtown San Francisco. And, around last Christmas, I just, we just wanted to get out. It was just too stressful. So we're just kind of looking for a quiet place to kind of hide out for a while and, wait it out and get vaccinated. And so a friend of Tammy's, my partner, her brother-in-law moved here recently because he got a job at a company, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Walmart? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, we've heard of them a little.
He had a job.
That might be it. They may be a thing someday.
That's what I hear. So he got a job at Walmart, and they said, hey, it's really nice and peaceful here, and you should come out. And we didn't care. So we just loaded up the car and drove from San Francisco to Northwest Arkansas. And for the first few months, we didn't really leave the house. But, once we got vaccinated, we started going around and meeting people and going out to eat. And it was great. We kind of fell in love with it. So we're still not sure whether this is, permanent or quasi-permanent or whatever, or what those words even mean now.
Sure.
But no plans to leave anytime soon. Really love it here.
Well, welcome, Phil. We appreciate you moving over to our way.
Well, and kind of the important things about being in Bentonville, if you haven't already figured this out, is the annual Squirrel Eating Festival. I don't know if you've had the benefit of that yet, but
not yet. But they are. The squirrels are very squirrely here. They are. This is the most squirrely squirrels I've ever seen. They're like high. They're like parkour squirrels. They're like very, very impressive. The squirrels in San Francisco are much more sedate. It may be the difference between meth and heroin or something. I don't know.
Right, maybe. It could be. It could be. Well, talk to us a little bit more about your your latest venture and why you're excited about it, and get into the we know you a pretty good round came together to get that thing headed in the right direction. So talk a little bit about what you're currently working on.
The company's called Mmhmm, and the idea is really to give the world communication superpowers. And I think it started as a joke, literally. We started it in May of 2020, so a couple of months after the pandemic started, and we were all we were working from home, locked up. Everyone was kind of tired and depressed, and everything was just tedious. And so we were just goofing around. We just wanted to, make ourselves laugh a little bit on all the endless video calls. So I just started playing around with, slides and fake backgrounds and that kind of stuff, never intending to make it a real product. And it just snowballed from there. Basically, we liked it a lot. We used it a lot internally. By we, I mean, we were at All Turtles at the time, which is the product studio that Mmhmm and a bunch of other stuff, came out of. And everyone who saw it encouraged us to make it a real product. And then, it went from there. We raised a bunch of money, and then hired a bunch of people, and then raised a bunch more money, and then hired a bunch more people, and then raised a bunch more money. And before long, here we are. So the product's been out for it's our 1 year anniversary soon. I think we launched the first version of the product on November 7th. So I didn't even realize that, but our 1 year anniversary is coming up. So it's only been a year, and it's a lot. It's an interesting year. Now we're up to about 100 people, fully distributed everywhere in the world, working on this thing. And a year ago there was, I don't know, 2 of us, 5 of us, something like that.
Well, I'm excited to have you on with us to celebrate the anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like you've covered a lot of ground in a year. Where do you see it going? I mean, it's been really entertaining watching you use it kind of as part of the podcast here. Where do you see it going? What's the next year or two look like?
I mean, I think the big change in the world that's happening right now is we're calling it out of office. Out of office is the movement. It's the out of office world that's happening now. And when I say out of office, I want you to hear it like I'm saying out of jail. It's freedom. It's new opportunity. And I think we've been thinking about it like this. This is the out of office loop, the OO loop. Kind of works like this, I think. Basically, quality of life improves quality of work, and quality of work improves quality of life. And that's the flywheel. So if you let people have a good quality of life, if you let them be intentional about where they want to live and what kind of neighborhoods and how much time they want to spend, with their kids or with their friends, and when they want to, work out, and you basically just let people choose to optimize their life to have a high quality of life. If those people are knowledge workers and they're creatives, then that leads to higher quality of work. And the higher quality of work means you have more satisfaction and, more money. And then you can turn that into improving your quality of life, and you get a better quality of work. So that's the flywheel, right? This quality of life improves quality of work flywheel is the thing that keeps going around. And I think the thing that was stopping this before was the office. The idea that this central portion of our lives was monopolized by this gigantic thing that called the office, where it's hard to have a really good quality of life if every day you've got to wake up 3 hours earlier than you want to wake up so that you can sit in traffic for 2 hours, so that you can be in the same physical space with a bunch of other people for 10 hours, so that you can sit in traffic for 2 hours again, maybe get home in time to see your kids 30 seconds before they fall asleep. And if you want to do anything else, if you want to have time for art or music or health, that all gets pushed out to the weekend or vacations. And then when you're young, you have to compromise a lot and live in a shitty place. And then maybe you get to have a good lifestyle when you retire, but what does that even mean? The office was stopping this virtuous cycle from spinning. Mm. And now, thanks to the pandemic, it got accelerated. There's a few 100 million people now that can choose to live where they can have the best life without having that affect where they work. It's never been true before. And that the effects of this are profound. the effects of, I think, the out of office world will literally change every single thing about society, like how we do education and healthcare and work and fun and travel and vacation and mentorship and family and friendships. All of it changes over the next 10 years. And we get to, we get a seat at the table of figuring out how it should change and helping build this reality a little bit.
The thing that's so interesting about that is it feels like we've definitely finally graduated from this sort of industrial revolution paradigm of being trapped in a factory, punching out whatever it is we're punching out, to realizing the factory is wherever you are, and wherever you can be accessed. And it's definitely freeing. I mean, we learned that we're largely hybrid, oftentimes remote. We come back in when we need to be together, but everybody is at any 4 points of the compass on any given day, many times, just because if we're not having an event in a location that requires all of us to be together, we don't need to all be together. So it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, we have a kind of a rule about this at our company, which is no one is remote. Because when I think of remote, I kind of imagine this. Like, I imagine that remote is fundamentally about disadvantage. It's about being lonely. Like, other people are like gathered somewhere and having fun and being productive, but you're not.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're not actually remote. We're distributed.
Yeah. I like it.
And that's like a big difference, right? It's intentional. Like, we design our company to be fully distributed because being distributed gives us superpowers. Just like the way the internet is like. The internet is distributed, like, it's not remote. It's distributed because being distributed gives a system so many fundamental advantages. Well, it gives a company so many advantages. It gives a life so many advantages. So we're sort of moving into this world where we're inventing what does it mean to be intentionally distributed by choice.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned, or with your graphic about being a product of All Turtles. Can you tell me a little bit more about All Turtles and the mission? I read that it's a mission-driven product studio, startup studio. One, what is a startup studio? And two, what is the mission behind All Turtles?
Well, we're trying to create worthwhile products, good products for the world with kind of as little bullshit as possible. I just want, look, I'm a really simple person. I just want to make the things that I wish existed. And I want to help other people make the things that I wish existed. And that's it. I just want, like, what is the easiest way? What is the shortest path to just like making products that I wish existed, that I think the world, would benefit from, without any of the, complexity that other ways of making companies and products, put you through. So like our central philosophy at All Turtles was that the Silicon Valley model is dumb. It doesn't work. Like, I've spent, 20, 30 years in this model, like on the treadmill, and it's pretty stupid for lots of reasons. But it's not good for the world. It's not good for entrepreneurs. It's not good for the region. Just look at how generally bad life in San Francisco has become. It's not an accident. It's partially because of this Silicon Valley style venture model that we have. And we want to create an alternative. We want a way for really brilliant people to make really hopefully high impact and hopefully cool products. And we just want to do it with, as little fuss as possible.
I want to follow up a little bit more on your point about being distributed. One of the phenomenons that has damaged or has caused rural areas to suffer for the past 70 years is this endless march towards urbanization, people going to the urban centers, people not being able to stay wherever it was that they were born because there was no opportunity. Do you finally see the distributed model being something that reverses that trend? Because you can really, depending on your skills, afford to be just about anywhere you want to be, because if you've got connectivity, you can be on a distributed team in a rural county, in a rural state, or a rural area in any country, as long as you have broadband access. What are your thoughts about urbanization versus a return to rural areas in general?
Yeah, I think the motto for us is you should work where you can have the best job, and you should live where you can have the best life. And for the first time in the history of the universe, a few 100 million people can make these two decisions independently of one another. That's never happened before. Like, think about like unbundling those two things. Where can you have the best job? Where can you have the best life? I've never had the opportunity to make that decision before separately. Like, up until recently, I never considered where do I want to live. Like, that wasn't even a question, because like, well, obviously I need to live wherever the job is. So like, if you think about it, like 2 years ago, before the pandemic started 2 years ago, how many human beings alive were there in the world that could make these two decisions separately from each other? They could choose to like work where they can have the best job and live where they can have the best life. Like, how many total human beings out of a population of, 7.8 billion? I mean, it was like 100,000 people that were lucky enough to be able to choose these things independently, and they had it pretty sweet. And now, 2 years later, there's probably 200 million people that could make this choice. Most knowledge workers, creative workers, not everyone, a couple 100 million. So we went from like 100,000 to like at least 100 million in 2 years. And 10 years, a decade from now, is probably going to be like 1 billion or 2 billion people that can make this choice independently. Again, not everyone, but you're going to go from 100,000 to 100 million to 1 or 2 billion. This is massive. And so, whether it's like returning to rural areas, like I've never been in a rural area before, so I'm not returning anywhere. Like I am deciding what is my best life. Where can I live the kind of life that I want to live right now? And I don't have to commit to it. Because if I decide later that I want to have a different kind of life, I can do that. And I don't have to worry about where I'm going to work, because I'm lucky enough to work at a company that doesn't care. In fact, encourages all of our employees to like improve their life because of that cycle, right? Because quality of life improves quality of work. We've got a capitalistic interest to get as high quality of work from our employees as possible. So we want them to have a high quality of life. We want that flywheel to go. And this would have been almost unheard of 2 years ago. Now it's already true for 100 to 200 million people worldwide. Not all of them understand it yet. Most don't, but that's okay. And a decade from now, it's going to be true for 1 billion or 2 billion people. And man, that just feels like the greatest time to like work on changing stuff that's ever existed, certainly in my lifetime.
Hey folks, Jeff Amerine here. Thanks again for tuning into the Startup Junkies podcast. Steve Blank, the father of modern entrepreneurship, recently called the book that Jeff Standrich and I wrote, Creating Startup Junkies, a must-read playbook for anyone who wants to kindle innovation and entrepreneurship in their community. This whole idea of building sustainable venture ecosystems in unexpected places gives you the tools, the techniques, and the inspiration to do what we've done in Northwest Arkansas and Central Arkansas in your neck of the woods. If you'd like to find out more, check out creatingstartupjunkies.com. Thanks again. Guys, jump in. Don't let me dominate all the airtime.
You got it, Davis.
Well, that's a super interesting point, Phil. Do you guys run into any issues, being out of office all the time? I know it's a great opportunity and for us to be able to do distributed work, but it's also great getting into the office and seeing everybody and doing those events. So talk to us a little bit about that, kind of how that balance kind of fits into Mmhmm's model.
Yeah, I mean, I think we there's a fundamental and very common kind of human desire and human reaction, which is that whenever there's like really big change, the natural thing to do is to look at the problems that are caused by that change and try to figure out how to go back to where we were before. And so you hear things like back to the office,
right?
Super common. That's how everyone thinks. It's how I think too. Mm-hmm. And I have to force myself to not think that way. I catch myself having those thoughts. I'm like, shut up, brain. That's loser talk. I'm not going back to anything.
Right.
We're not going back to anything. We're never going back to anything. We're going forward. We're not going back to the way things were. We're going forward to the way things should be. Mm-hmm. And there is nothing I want to preserve. I don't want to like go back to the way things were, because the way things were sucked. Mm-hmm. Maybe I have nostalgia for them. Maybe they were slightly better in some ways, but they sucked. We're going to go forward. We're going to like make the world that we want to exist, right? Not go back to the world that used to be. And this is a very unnatural way of thinking, even for me, but for most people, because like human cognitive bias is very sharply like conservative and negative. And it takes real effort. Like it is pretty easy to point out the problems, and you can seem smarter by pointing out the problems. It takes far more like creative imagination to not look at the problems, but to look at the superpowers, look at the things that are already better and try to figure out how to double down on them, how to make them better. But that's, I think, what entrepreneurship is. Like entrepreneurship is as much about solving problems as it is about like imagining something radically better and then like working towards making it better. So I am super happy that we're never going to go to an office, never going to go back to an office. It's great. And it makes a few things a little bit more difficult, and we can mitigate those things. And we've got all sorts of provisional solutions and answers that we're experimenting with. But it also gives us such important superpowers that we are never going to give that up. Like the stuff that's better about getting rid of the office is so much more important than the stuff that's worse. And obviously not everyone understands this. Most people don't understand it yet. And that's good, right? If everyone understood it, it'd be too late. Like the fact that lots of companies are delusional about this is like that, you know, their lag in understanding is my opportunity to build something.
Right. That's a perfect answer to that question.
Thanks.
Sure.
I try.
And Phil, you know, I appreciate the commentary you said about the Silicon Valley model is dumb, and you've spent some time as a VC, and there's probably lots of room for disruption within the venture capital world. We've seen some things rise in equity-based crowdfunding, and we still have these archaic kind of accredited investor rules that make no sense. There's not accredited gambler rules, and yet you could waste your whole life's earnings in the Cherokee Casino 30 miles from here if you really wanted to, without a government entity questioning your rationale. How do you see the venture capital world and early stage investment changing in the next several years?
I think the main problem, the main stupidity is actually not directly about the venture. The main problem is the company, is the concept of the startup, is the concept of the company. I think about it like this. Like, let's imagine that you are right now one of the most brilliant musicians, like naturally gifted musicians alive in the world. You're like a 1 in a million, like Mozart level musical genius, right? You're like literally Mozart level, like musical genius right now. You don't have to make a music company, right? Like platforms have already been created, like you know, Spotify and YouTube, where you can just play and you're going to reach, you know, 1 billion people if you're really that good. Or if you're like one of the top, most brilliant writers in the world, you don't have to like make a writing company. You just write, right? And you got Substack and Medium, and you know, you write and you get to an audience. If you're one of the most brilliant filmmakers in the world, you don't have to like make a film studio. You like go make a film with like Netflix or, you know, HBO or something. But if you're one of the most brilliant, like Mozart level, 1 in a million, like product thinkers, you have to make a company first. Like we take these people, we as investors, we take these people who are like potential, allegedly brilliant product founders, and we're like, okay, that's an interesting idea you have. And we'll get to it. But first, make a shitty little startup. Here's the Wikipedia page about how to raise money, and here's what a 409A valuation is, and don't be late on your 83B elections. Here's how you hire people, here's how you fire people. Here's the 10,000 other things that you're probably going to screw up because they're really difficult, but more importantly, they're boring and they have nothing to do with your idea. But do that first. First, run this like fragile little thing called a startup, and then we'll figure out whether your idea like makes any sense, whether your product like is good. And right, as a result of that, the vast majority of startups fail. And most of them fail for reasons that have nothing to do with the product idea. They never get a chance to test the product because they fail because of, you know, co-founder drama or legal something, or they couldn't raise money or whatever. They fail in stupid ways. It would be as if like you're doing a, you know, let's say you're a filmmaker, let's like extend the Netflix analogy. You got this like crazy creative idea for a show on Netflix. And they're like, okay, yeah, here's a few $1 million to like make that, you know, make a pilot for the show. Oh, and by the way, like figure out what cameras you need to use and figure out what kind of lights you need and figure out how microphones work. Like they don't do that, right? They bring you in, they give you a bunch of professionals, And 0% of the Netflix pilots will fail because like some young filmmaker used the wrong microphone and ruined all the footage, right? Like technically all of these things are great. So they actually do like a legit test. Like, is this idea really good? So that's the main issue, right? The main issue with the Silicon Valley model of venture funded startups is the startups. Why should you have to make a company first? You should make the product first. And then if the product is good and it's working, and if the way for the product to reach its highest impact is to be embodied in this like independent small company, great, let's make a startup, which is what we did. Like for example, for Mmhmm.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, then great, don't waste your time on it. Go on to do something else. So I think that's actually the central problem. It's not like the blue sky laws that prevent people from investing. I agree with you. People should be able to invest in whatever they want to invest in. I think it's that we fetishized the startup, and I don't care about startups. I care about brilliant people having a chance to show their brilliance and make high impact products. And I don't want them to waste their time making startups first. They can make the startups once the product needs a startup.
Well, and that speaks to the venture studio model. I mean, stuff gets killed early on by virtue of the lack of merit of the product or the interest that a consumer or a customer would have in it, versus you've gone through all the grief of putting the box around a product that never going to make it.
After Evernote, I was pretty burned out. And so I thought I would kind of retire, semi-retire. So I became a VC. I joined General Catalyst as a managing director for a couple of years. And it was great. It was a really interesting job. I learned a ton, including that I just am not very good at just being an investor. But while I was there, I did a little bit of just some back of the napkin math on like what kind of deals the top tier Silicon Valley VCs do, like top tier tech, like early stage, like seed stage and A round. And there's kind of there were six factors which determined how likely you are to get top tier early stage Silicon Valley tech financing. It was kind of the six-fold path, 6 factors that really like influence it. And they were this, basically, if you're white or South Asian, male, between the ages of 21 and 27, with a computer science or computer engineering degree from Stanford, and you still live within 50 miles of Stanford. If you were like those, oh, sorry, my thumb, 6. I did this and I was like, wait, is that 7? No, it's because I forgot my thumb. It's 6 things. If you're those 6 things, you have some shot of getting, top tier, early stage Silicon Valley funding. When I was doing it, it's changed a little bit, but not that much. And for every one of those things that you're not, your odds decrease by an order of magnitude, like 10x per thing that you're not. So when I looked at the deals that were getting done, a lot of them, like half of them, had all 6 things. Like literally half of the deals were white, male, 21 to 27, some kind of a computer engineering degree from Stanford, still living, within 50 miles of Stanford. Half. Now, nothing wrong with those 6 things, but that's shouldn't represent half of the opportunity. Sometimes we do 5 out of 6, sometimes 4 out of 6. I almost never saw a deal get done, almost never, that had fewer than 4 out of those 6 things. So if you are a Mozart level, 1 in a billion genius, but you're a 35-year-old woman from Japan living in Tokyo with an architecture background, you could be absolutely brilliant. You have no access. You have no shot. So that's kind of the other problem, right? Like the 2 main Silicon Valley model problems is you have to make this fragile little startup, and it's really parochial about what kinds of people and what kinds of ideas it lets through. And I just think there's a lot more. I think that really amazing talent is super rare. Exceptional talent is, by definition, right? It's super rare. If really exceptional talent was common, it wouldn't be very exceptional. So super exceptional talent, which you need, is super rare, but I think it's evenly distributed throughout the world. And we just wanted a model that lets many more of these super rare talented people to have access to use their brilliance to hopefully make products that the world can benefit from.
Okay, Phil, on that point, with All Turtles having more of a focus on the product rather than the company, what does the vetting process look like to where you can find that talent?
We don't really have a process. Process is too generous a word for it. We're not a program. We're not like Y Combinator. We don't have like semesters. We don't have like an intake thing. You can't even apply. You can get in touch. We talk to people, but it's really been, we work on a few things at a time. We're only working on like 3 or 4 things at any given time. And it's really meant to be like, we haven't tried to scale it very much. We haven't tried to make it a process. We're thinking about it. Now that we've had some good successes, we're kind of thinking about it. But we're just not sure right now. So I think it's like premature to say like, here's how we do it. We have some processes for some things, like, we have selection criteria for ideas that we work on, that kind of stuff. But there's so few things that we just try to make the relatively few things that we work on, we try to make them successful. And we haven't really tried to scale it yet, although I think we will at some point.
And I know we're running a bit long, but something else I was curious about, I was reading your article in 2016 about kind of that paradigm shift you saw with Apple, and then with 2016 going more for the dynamic conventional UXs and everything. And you talked about something that stuck out with me was looking at this critical mass of building blocks when they get to good enough, and how the entire category can sprint to great with like AI, machine learning, NLP, et cetera. What have you seen since then, and what do you see going forward to that next paradigm shift?
Yeah, I think I was writing in particular about bots, about conversational user interfaces. And I think I thought that conversational user interfaces would really become prominent, that like people would want to interact with technology by having conversations. And I was so wrong about that, which happens a lot. Like, I'm wrong about a lot of shit. And yeah, turns out, nope, people don't actually want to do this. I didn't want to do it. When it kind of came down to it, I think for some things, conversational interfaces really did take off. Alexa, that kind of stuff. Hear me. I always have to be careful saying that word. But for the most part, like, I was just wrong about that. I think the model, you were very kind not to actually point out the thing that I was talking about, because I was so wrong about it. But I think the model that I used, I think it was the right model. This idea that like a bunch of things get from being, kind of bubbling out there to good enough, and then there's a state change. I think that model is really good, and I apply that all the time. I think that's actually happening right now with video, with this like a bunch of things around video were like bubbling around, but several of the related technologies got good enough, and then the pandemic happened, and so that's when it really, like, if COVID had hit, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had this revolution, because like video just wasn't good enough yet.
I'm ready.
So like both of those things kind of came together really well. And I do believe in that process, although I was wrong about bots. Turns out no one cares about bots.
And then one last thing that really stuck out to me, and then I'll pass it off to Jeff Hill on the plane, is when I was watching the video on about the name origin. You showed a diagram of love, hate, and indifference, and I thought that was really interesting. Could you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah. Let me see if I even have that. Maybe. So I think, oh yeah, this is what you're referring to. So I think the idea is, if you imagine a graph, a line of like possible reactions to whatever, to your idea, to your name, whatever. It's kind of easy to imagine this like this kind of thing, this graph where you have love on one side and hate on the other side, and people can kind of be somewhere on there. But I actually don't think this is super interesting here. I'm going to switch to a different background so you can see it better. Here we go. It's the classic bricks. I think actually it's more useful to imagine this as a horseshoe, where love and hate are actually not that far from each other. Because if you've gotten someone to care enough to actually form a strong opinion, that's very big, like that's unusual, and often you can get people to jump over that air gap. So if you get people who hate your name or whatever, your product, quite frequently they're actually engaged enough to care. And if you listen, if you hang around, if you try to change some things, you can get people to jump. You can get people to go from hate to love. And love and hate are not opposites of each other. The opposite of love and hate, both, is indifference. Like that's really the difficult thing. If people are indifferent, they're actually really far away. It's hard to get them to care. And so a name like Mmhmm obviously is like, a lot of people really hate that name, and a lot of people really love that name. But no one is up here. No one is like up here. And that's kind of the lesson, is like, I want to be hanging out, like these are my people. Like I want to be here. I want to be doing things that elicit a reaction, hopefully as much as possible on the positive side. But it's okay if someone is negative. And I want to minimize the amount of time that I'm spending with people who just don't care, because you're just not going to get very much out of them. So Mmhmm may be a really good name. I think it is a really good name. It may be a really bad name. I think it's also a really bad name. Both things can be true at the same time. It's not a boring name. And that was important for us. And this is a philosophy that we try to apply to lots of design.
People are not going to forget the name.
No, they're not going to forget the name, and they're going to think something about it.
I mean, we're not as clever as that, but Startup Junkie was a name that I spent about 30 seconds thinking about when I was registering it, and it stuck. And people typically don't forget it once they've heard it. So I mean, there's something to that. So this is the way we typically land the plane when we're talking to guests. And if you could take the knowledge that you've accumulated over the last many years and all the various things that you've done, and go back to your younger self when you're in Boston going to school and you're getting in the mix of thinking about the first startup or already working on it, what advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I think I have a standard joke about this, but I've decided to retire this joke. So maybe what I can do is I can explain the joke, and therefore in explaining it, I will have retired it, because I'll never be able to say this joke again.
That sounds great.
So, but this is a question that I get, quite a bit, and my standard joke you have answered it has always been, you mean like if I had a time machine or something? And people would be like, yeah, like if you had a time machine, like, man, if I had a time machine, I could like go back and like give advice to like, my 20-year-old self. I'd be like, dude, don't worry about anything, because in 30 years, you're going to have a time machine. Everything's going to be fine. But I've kind of been using that joke for like 10 years. So
yeah, that may be the best answer we've had to that question yet. Maybe we need to come up with a better land the plane question at this point. That may be the message. No, that's great.
Yeah, I think the honest answer to that is being a CEO, being a founder is a very damaging thing. It's very difficult. You wind up banging up your brain quite a bit. It hurts. There's no way to avoid that damage. You can mitigate it a little bit, but it's like skiing. You feel like if you're a championship skier and you're skiing for 30 years, like, you're banging up your knees. You take care of yourself, but like, no one expects you to be as good a skier at 50 than you were at 20, even though you've got 30 more years of skiing experience. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with your brain. Your brain is not software. There's nothing magical about it. You're banging it up just as much. Being a founder is intensely difficult, intensely traumatic. And you can't do it. You can't be a CEO the same way when you're 50. I'm not 50 yet, but I'm going to be 50 soon. I can't be the same CEO now as I could have 30 years ago. I have to do it differently. And, I wish I'd understood that earlier, because I didn't. I learned a lot of bad habits, as I think a lot of startup people do. A lot of bad habits in my 20s about, the role of like personal heroics and all-nighters and how much stress was healthy, and all that shit catches up with you. So I think I would tell myself to be a little bit more thoughtful about how much damage I was inflicting on myself, make sure that it was worth it, and think through about how to live and be a CEO in that, not pretending that it's not a real thing.
Great answer. Great answer. Well, listen, it has been fantastic having you on. Thanks for taking the time out. And if our listeners want, or viewers want to hear more about what you're up to, the ventures you're working on, the venture studio, you personally, what's the best way for them to find out?
I mean, I'm easy to find. So, if you can't find me, then That's a good filter. So
Just a Google search, right?
Yeah.
Wikipedia. All right.
yeah,
Very good.
but thank you, and thank you for making this place. By which I mean, Northwest Arkansas, like so cool. I am genuinely in love with it. So
Well, we're glad you're here.
looking forward to meeting you guys in person and getting a meal.
100%. And hopefully over some adult beverages of your choice.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Phil.
Take care.